이번 선거 날짜는 6월 28일이고요. 사전 투표는 6월 24일 날, 25일 날, 26일 날이고 이번에 선거를 한인 커뮤니티가 우리의 기회라고 생각해서 좋겠어요. 우리의 힘하고 목소리를 보일 수 있는 그런 기회라 생각해서 꼭 참석해 주시고 투표해 주세요. I decided to run because I think right now we have a unique opportunity to change the direction of the country. I think right now we're living in a really interesting moment in the federal landscape where there's an opportunity for generational change for younger people to come into the mix and to step up. I think there's also something about the immigrant community and Korean American community for me personally where I really believe that the immigrant community maybe has a closer understanding of what the American promise is, right? Our families came to America not that long ago for the idea of good education, for opportunities, and for to live a life, a better opportunity for their kids than they got at their home countries. And I think we have an opportunity to remind Americans what that promise is, because I think we've forgotten it a little bit. The big, beautiful bill includes cuts to Medicare, cuts to Social Security, cuts to SNAP benefits. It removes funding for programs that people rely on every single day, and instead it funds tax cuts for the wealthy and for corporations. And that's not a fair system. And I think what people want, not only in the Korean American community, but just broadly, generally, I think people are interested in a different kind of politics and a different way of doing business so that it can be a little bit more fair for people. Yeah, my winning strategy is going to be to make sure that we're convincing Democratic voters of the reason we're doing this, because I think I'm not alone in thinking that it's time for generational change. I believe that other Democratic voters believe that too. But in addition to that, it's going to require all of us to be a part of this. And so bringing in Asian American voters, bringing in Korean American voters, bringing in folks who have traditionally not had a seat at the table, like young people, I think that's going to be how we're going to win this. There are 3 days of early voting. June 24th, June 25th, June 26th. The tactics that we're taking, we're door knocking.
Phone knocking?
We're phone banking. We're text banking. And we're sending postcards. And we're also doing mail, so like mail pieces at home, and also digital advertising. I've been elected twice in my district now. And I think that tells people that I've done a good job in my community. They know who I am and I've delivered for them. I think we're going to work on getting them out again because they know that they want to see something different in Congress and that I can deliver that for them. That's the idea.
So what you want to promise? Good job?
Like the promise is a good job, yeah. But I think the promise is a good job. I think, since being in the House of Delegates for 4 years, you and I have talked about a lot of bills, whether it's for pregnancy, special health insurance for pregnant people, or it's the towing bill that we passed, right? So that you can't have your car towed in the apartments. There's a lot of work that I've been able to do with a common sense approach in Richmond, and I think that kind of common sense approach is necessary in Washington, D.C. because everything in D.C. is so broken right now. There's that whole situation of ICE and the threat of federal agencies. Like, they are unmarked, they are masking their faces, and they are showing up and taking people off the streets. That is scary and is a very, very dangerous. Yoon Seo-chung, our young Korean student, who is a green card holder, who is a permanent resident, and whose rights are whose immigration status is being threatened because of her exercise of political speech. That should also have a chilling effect on all of us. I don't think my family, my parents, my grandparents, they didn't come to America to live under the fear of political oppression, right? They came here because America is supposed to be the land of the free. I believe in the people. I think that's maybe the thing that I believe in the most that can stop Donald Trump. I think that the people can stop Donald Trump, and I think when you have leaders who can help people mobilize and remember their own power, I think that's I think this is not that different than all of the protests back in the 80s in Korea and Gwangju, right? It takes people power to stop a military and authoritarian regime, and I think that our leaders need to be helping people take back the power. I think it's young leadership that's missing right now, but it's also about diverse experiences, having an immigration background, but also women. We used to have Wexton and we used to have Spamberger, but we don't have either of them anymore. And so in Northern Virginia, we are only represented by men. But one thing that Congressman Connolly did, and did so well for our community, was he fought for federal workers. Whether that was postal workers or federal employees, he always fought for federal employees. And I think with what the Trump administration has done with DOJ, firing thousands of employees, I think that's an issue that's at the heart of the 11th district. I think that's what probably concerns us the most. There's a really good selection of candidates in the field, right? Northern Virginia has a lot of talent. But the difference between what I'm proposing and offering as a candidate and what the other candidates offer are different because I think right now in DC, we see so many leaders who are looking to figure out how to talk about the message the right way. How do we talk about immigration? How do we talk about healthcare? How do we talk about public education? And the reason that people don't know how to talk about it is because they've never lived those experiences. I would welcome people to walk in our shoes as a kid of immigrants, right? I think that makes me stand out a little bit because that means I understand what it feels like when your dad is a permanent resident and a green card holder, but if he's traveling abroad, like, have you ever stayed up to wonder, like, are you going to be able to get back in the country or not under this administration? Those are like real experiences, and so you can go and you can say that you're going to go and advocate or fight for policies, but if you've never lived those policies and have felt the impact on your life, you aren't going to fight for it like it's personal. And the difference is that I think for me, these issues are personal. I think the lived experience part of it is so critical, and we're living through a time right now. The word that I use is conjuncture. A conjuncture is a moment in time where the political, economic, and social conditions are right to have a huge impact and change the entire direction of our history. We're living in a conjuncture right now where we can say that because of what's happening, we might be able to change the entire course of where America goes for the next 5 or 10 or 20 years. And being someone who comes from those lived experiences with the changing demographics of America is all the difference. And whether you're going to be a fighter who's going to actually understand what's at stake, or if you're just going to be a good ally. And that's different. Well, I'm really proud to have the endorsement of the United States Senator Andy Kim. Andy endorsed me early on in my race, and Andy is someone that I really admire. He's the first Korean American Democratic congressman. He's the first Korean American senator, and he's the first Asian American senator from the East Coast of America. And the way that he thinks about politics, I think, is exactly how I think about politics, that it's time for a change. Like, we can demand integrity and we can demand transparency and accessibility from our politics. And I think Andy has been trying to push for that and has successfully done so. There is a sizable Korean American population here who have been making contributions to the local economy. They've been making contributions in all sorts of ways, as small business owners, as healthcare providers, as teachers, and as administrators, and certainly with our vibrant community of businesses. And I think that this is an opportunity to say that we, as Korean Americans, deserve the right to have representation just like everybody else, and that we belong here in Virginia too, and we're exercising our political power. I often say that sometimes I think the Korean American community and the immigrant community thinks of America as still someone else's land. They have visitor mindset, that this is not my home. But I hope that with this election they can say, no, this is my home, right? And we deserve representation that understands the lived experiences of our shared story.